Welcome to the late Alfred Hitchcock Presents. This is the late Alfred Hitchcock, and I'm the presenter, offering you a story they wouldn't let me do on TV, the spoil sports. However, Radio 7 has no such scruples, presumably on the somewhat misguided assumption that out of sight is out of mind. How foolish, when we know that the imagination is a barely contained beast. I am living proof of the power of the imagination. For years I have imagined myself to be a gentleman of somewhat portly proportions, when in reality I am a slim and athletic gay blade. And speaking of blades, our tale today is a sharp little item about the murderous power of the mind, The Waxwork by A.M. Burridge. While the uniformed attendants of Mariner's Waxworks were ushering the last stragglers through the doors, the manager sat in his office, interviewing Raymond Hewson. Well, there's nothing new in your request. In fact, we refuse it to different people about 3 times a week. We have nothing to gain and something to lose by letting people spend the night in our murderer's den. If I allowed it and some young idiot lost his senses, what would be my position? It used to be said years ago that Madame Tussauds will give a man £100 for sleeping alone in the Chamber of Horrors. I hope you don't think that we have made any such offer. What is your paper, Mr. Hewson? I should find no difficulty in getting the story printed. The Morning Echo would use it like a shot. Very well, Mr. Hewson. Get your story printed in the Morning Echo. There'll be a £5 note waiting for you here. I own I shouldn't care to take it on. I've seen those figures dressed and undressed. I know all about the process of their manufacture. But I should hate having to sleep down there alone among them. Why? Well, there isn't any reason. I don't believe in ghosts. It's just that I couldn't sit alone among them all night, with their seeming to stare at me in the way they do. I warn you, you're in for a very uncomfortable night. Hewson had known that from the moment when the idea had first occurred to him. His soul sickened at the prospect. But he had a wife and family to keep. I don't think your waxworks will worry me much. You're not superstitious. Not a bit. But you're a journalist. You must have a strong imagination. The news editors for whom I've worked have always complained I haven't any. Right. I think the last of the people have gone. I'll take you down and show you round. I must ask you not to smoke. We had a fire scare down in the murderer's den this evening. I don't know who gave the alarm, but whoever it was a false one. Hewson followed the manager through 6 rooms, where attendants were busy shrouding the kings and queens of England. The manager stopped once and spoke to a man in uniform, saying something about an armchair in the murderer's den. He led the way through an open barrier and down ill-lit stone stairs, which conveyed a sinister impression of giving access to a dungeon. The waxwork murderers stood on low pedestals with numbered tickets at their feet. Recent notorieties rubbed dusty shoulders with the old favourites. There was Lefroy, the poor half-baked little snob who killed for gain so that he might ape the gentleman. Within 5 yards of him sat Mrs. Thompson, that erotic romanticist, hanged to propitiate the British middle-class matronhood. That's Crippen. I expect you'll recognise him. Insignificant little beast who looks as if he couldn't tread on a worm. And there's old Vaquier. You can't miss him because of his beard. Who's that? Oh, I was coming to him. This is our star turn. He's the only one of the bunch that hasn't been hanged. The figure was that of a small, slight man, not much more than 5 feet in height. It wore little waxed moustaches, large spectacles, and a caped coat. There was something so exaggeratedly French in its appearance that it reminded Hewson of a stage caricature. He could not have said precisely why the mild-looking face seemed to him so repellent. Dr. Bourdet was the terror of Paris. He carried on his work of healing by day and of throat-cutting by night. He killed for the sheer devilish pleasure it gave him to kill, and always in the same way, with a razor. After his last crime, he left a clue behind him which set the police upon his track. When he realized that the toils were closing about him, he mysteriously disappeared. There's no doubt he managed to make away with himself.
What eyes he's got?
You find the eyes bite into you. Well, that's excellent realism, then, for Bourdette was supposed to mesmerize his victims before dispatching them.
I thought I saw him move.
You'll have more than one optical illusion before the night's out, I expect. You shan't be locked in. You can come upstairs when you've had enough of it. Sorry, I can't give you any more light. For obvious reasons, we keep this place as gloomy as possible.
Hewson wheeled the armchair a little way down the central gangway and deliberately turned it so that its back was towards the effigy of Dr. Bourdette. He faced the sinister figures boldly enough. They were only waxworks. So long as he let that thought dominate all others, he promised himself that all would be well. It did not, however, save him long from the discomfort occasioned by the waxen stare of Dr. Bourdette, which, he knew, was directed upon him from behind. The eyes of the little Frenchman's effigy haunted and tormented him, and he itched with the desire to turn and look.
He's only a waxwork like the rest of you. You're all only waxworks.
They were only waxworks. Yes. But waxworks don't move. Not that he'd seen the least movement anywhere, but it struck him that in the moment or two while he'd looked behind him, there had been the least subtle change in the grouping of the figures in front. Crippen, for instance, seemed to have turned at least 1 degree to the left. He looked round quickly and awfully over his right shoulder, straight into the vapid countenance of Lefroy, which smiled vacantly back as if to say, "It wasn't I." Of course it wasn't he, or any of them. It was his own nerves. Or was it? Hadn't Crippen moved again during that moment when his attention was directed elsewhere? This was very cowardly and very absurd. They were only waxworks. Then why all that silent unrest about him? He swung round quickly to encounter the mild but baleful stare of Dr. Bourdette. Then, without warning, he jerked his head back to stare straight at Crippen. Ha! He nearly caught Crippen that time. Somebody was breathing. Or was it his own breath which sounded to him as if it came from a distance? He sat rigid, listening and straining, until he exhaled with a long sigh. His own breath, after all. Or, if not, something had divined that he was listening and had ceased breathing simultaneously. Everywhere his gaze encountered the vacant waxen faces. They were like naughty children in a class, whispering, fidgeting and laughing behind their teacher's back. This would not do. He must clutch at something, grip with his mind upon something which belonged essentially to the workaday world. Now, what was that funny story which somebody had told him in the Falstaff yesterday? He recalled part of it, but not all, for the gaze of Dr. Bourdette urged, challenged, and finally compelled him to turn. "You moved, damn you! I saw you!" Then he sat quite still, staring straight before him, like a man found frozen in the Arctic snows. Dr. Bourdette's movements were leisurely. He stepped off his pedestal with the mincing care of a lady alighting from a bus. "Good evening. You cannot move or speak without my bidding, but you can hear me perfectly well. Something tells me that you are, shall I say, nervous? My dear sir, have no illusions. I am not one of these contemptible effigies miraculously come to life. I am Dr. Bourdette himself. Pardon me, but I am a little stiff. And let me explain. I was close to this building this evening when I saw a policeman regarding me as thought too curiously. I mingled with the crowd and came in here, and an inspiration showed me a certain means of escape. I raised a cry of fire, and when all the fools had rushed to the stairs, I stripped my effigy of the caped coat, donned it, and took its place on the pedestal. I own that I have since spent a very fatiguing evening, but fortunately I was not always being watched and had opportunities to ease the rigidity of my pose. The manager's description of me, which I had the embarrassment of being compelled to overhear, was biased, but not altogether inaccurate. Clearly, I am not dead, although it is as well that the world thinks otherwise. His account of my hobby, which I have indulged for years, was in the main true. The world is divided between collectors and non-collectors. With the non-collectors, we are not concerned. The collectors collect anything, according to their individual tastes, from money to cigarette cards, from moth to matchboxes. I collect throats. He paused again and regarded Hewson's throat with interest mingled with disfavor. But you have a skinny neck, sir, if you will overlook a personal remark. I should never have selected you from choice. I like men with thick necks. Thick, red necks. This is a little French razor. The blade, you will observe, is very narrow. They do not cut very deep, but deep enough. In just one little moment, you shall see for yourself. I shall ask you the little civil question of all the polite barbers. Does the razor suit you, sir? You will have the goodness to raise your chin a little. Thank you. And a little more. Merci, monsieur. Ah. Merci. Merci.
The waxwork figures stood apathetically in their places. In their midst, Hewson sat still. His chin was up-tilted, as if he were waiting to receive attention from a barber. And although there was not a scratch upon his throat, nor anywhere upon his body, he was cold and dead. His previous employers were wrong in having him credited with no imagination. Dr. Bourdette on his pedestal watched the dead man unemotionally. He did not move, nor was he capable of motion. But then, after all, he was only a waxwork. Well, as with food and fashion, the French do seem to be at the cutting edge of murder. Until our next tale, pleasant dreams and vive la guillotine. Incidentally, no blade was blunted during the making of this program. Goodbye, and pleasant dreams. The Late Alfred Hitchcock Presents is presented by the late Alfred Hitchcock with the help of the actor Michael Roberts. It is produced by Frank Sterling at Unique for Radio 7.